What if I told you that the version of marriage being sold to you, the one celebrated in movies, pushed by society, and maybe even expected by your family, is a lie? What if I told you that for men, it's not a partnership, but a gilded cage, a beautifully decorated trap designed to systematically strip you of your power, your wealth, and your fundamental freedom? Think about every romantic ideal you've ever been fed. The grand gestures, the sacrifice, the idea that she completes you. What if all of it is just a carefully crafted narrative, a story meant to keep you docile, to keep you dependent, and ultimately, to make you disposable? This isn't some new, radical idea. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche saw the writing on the wall over a century ago. He once wrote, "The married philosopher belongs to comedy." Now that sounds like a joke, but it's deadly serious. He understood that no truly free-thinking, powerful man would ever willingly chain himself to a system that is fundamentally rigged against him. He saw it as a punchline because the outcome was so tragically predictable. And if you're brave enough to question the script, if you're willing to keep watching, you might just be able to save yourself from a future of quiet desperation and a lifetime of silent suffering. To really understand what's at stake, let me tell you a story. It's a story about a man named Robert. And I want you to listen closely, because parts of his story might sound uncomfortably familiar. Robert was, by all accounts, a success. He was a talented engineer, pulling in a solid six-figure salary. In 2015, he married his college sweetheart, the woman he thought was the love of his life. For the next 7 years, he played the part of the perfect husband flawlessly. He was the provider, making sure the mortgage was paid and there was always food on the table. He was the protector, the stable rock of the family. He was the quintessential nice guy who never raised his voice, who always put her happiness and the kids' needs before his own. He believed he was building a legacy, a life of shared dreams. Then, on their 7th anniversary, an evening he had planned to be a celebration, he was served with divorce papers. He was completely blindsided. The woman he had built his entire world around had decided she was unhappy. The fallout was catastrophic. The court, in its infinite wisdom, gave her the house he had paid for. It gave her the majority of his savings, the nest egg he had diligently built. And the most soul-crushing blow of all, it gave her his children. Robert was left with a shell of his former life. A man who once had everything was reduced to an apartment, a staggering monthly alimony payment, and the privilege of seeing his own kids on supervised visits every other weekend. He went from being a father to being a visitor, from a husband to a human ATM. Now, it's easy to hear a story like Robert's and think, well, he must have done something wrong. He must be the exception. But here is the terrifying truth you need to internalize. Robert is not the exception. Robert is the rule. Nietzsche saw this pattern emerging more than 100 years ago. He warned that modern marriage was morphing from a sacred bond into a social cage, a system where men are tricked into trading their masculine fire and their freedom for the illusion of domestic stability and affection. In his masterpiece, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he wrote a line that should send a shiver down your spine. You are not yet free. You still search for freedom. You must first be burned in your own flame. For countless men, modern marriage is that flame. It is a slow burn that consumes them alive, leaving behind only ash and regret. And if you think I'm being dramatic, let's just look at the cold, hard numbers. The statistics are not just horrifying. They paint a picture of a full-blown crisis. Over 70%, let me repeat that, 70% of all divorces are initiated by women. This is often in marriages where the man, like Robert, believes everything is fine. He's going to work, he's providing, he thinks they're a team. He has no idea his partner has been planning her exit strategy for months or even years. The infamous walk-away wife syndrome isn't some myth cooked up by bitter men. It's a calculated, well-documented social phenomenon. Researchers at the National Marriage Project at the University of Virginia found a stark difference in marital attitudes. Women are far more likely to end a marriage if they simply feel unhappy or unfulfilled, while men will often tolerate years of deep misery out of a sense of duty, a commitment to the vows they made. And when that divorce finally happens, the consequences for men are brutal. On average, a man will lose 50% of his net worth. Many lose everything they've ever worked for. They're financially reset to zero, often in their 40s or 50s, with their peak earning years behind them. But the financial ruin, as devastating as it is just the beginning. The emotional and psychological castration runs far deeper. Think about it. When was the last time you saw a married man portrayed in popular culture as anything other than a bumbling fool, a henpecked loser, or a complete cuckold? From Homer Simpson to Phil Dunphy in Modern Family, the message is relentless and clear. Marriage is the place where a man's strength, intelligence, and ambition go to die. He becomes a walking punchline, a servant in his own home, constantly managed and corrected by his better half. Nietzsche had a name for this: the slave morality. It's a system of values where the naturally strong, the assertive, the ambitious are shamed and guilted into serving the weak. Society has been engineered to despise the very essence of powerful masculinity, and then has the audacity to wonder where all the good men have gone. History shows us this wasn't always the case. The decline has been methodical. In ancient Rome, the pater familias, the male head of the household, held absolute authority. His word was law. The family structure was a clear hierarchy built around his strength and leadership. But fast forward to the 19th century, Victorian morality infected the West, and marriage twisted into a prison of sentimentality. The ideal man was no longer a warrior, a leader, or a conqueror of his own destiny. He was a gentleman, a walking wallet, neutered and domesticated, expected to suppress all his raw, masculine instincts for the sake of a civilized society. And today, that suppression is codified into law. The legal system doesn't just encourage this dynamic, it enforces it. It overwhelmingly treats husbands not as partners, but as disposable income streams. Here's the hardest pill to swallow, the one that sticks in your throat. The concept of romantic love, as it's been sold to you, is a masterfully executed lie. That intoxicating dopamine rush you feel in the beginning, that feeling that you've found your soulmate, is temporary. It fades. But the legal contract you sign, that is permanent. And when her feelings change, when that chemical high wears off and she decides she's no longer in love, the state doesn't side with you, the man who upheld his end of the bargain. It sides with her feelings. A 2018 Harvard study confirmed what many men already knew in their gut. Divorce courts show overwhelming favor to women in over 80% of cases, regardless of the circumstances. Even when the woman is the one who cheated, the one who left, the one who was the aggressor. In the court of family law, men are presumed guilty until proven broke. But there is hope, because the first step to disarming a trap is seeing it. The men who are truly thriving in the 21st century are the ones who are rejecting this broken script. They are the men building their own empires instead of signing a marriage license that's statistically loaded against them. They are the men who understand Nietzsche's ultimate truth. The higher man, the truly free man, stands apart from the herd. There was a time when marriage was not a trap for a man, but a throne. A time when men were not seen as disposable wallets, but as the undeniable lords of their own destiny. To understand how far we've fallen, you have to look back at what we once were. Think of the ancient Spartans. A Spartan man did not ask for his wife's loyalty. He commanded it through his strength, his discipline, and his unwavering commitment to his purpose. His wife didn't consider filing for divorce on a whim because she felt unhappy. She respected him. In a way, she feared the consequences of his disapproval, and she followed his lead. Why? Because he was a warrior, a builder, a man who would sooner die on his shield than live a life of weakness. He was a pillar of his society, and his household reflected that strength. Now, compare that image to the modern man. A man today can be a decorated soldier, a successful entrepreneur, a pillar of his community, and still be financially and emotionally destroyed, stripped of his own children, for missing a single child support payment after a divorce he never wanted. What happened? How did we get from the Spartan to the supplicant? The answer lies in one of the most successful and insidious social engineering projects in human history: the systematic dismantling of male authority. Let's wind the clock back. In medieval Europe, marriage was primarily a contract between families. It was about alliances, legacy, and the consolidation of property. A man's home was, quite literally, his castle, both legally and spiritually. The prevailing religious and social doctrines preached wifely submission, and the law unequivocally upheld a husband's right to rule his household. This wasn't seen as tyranny. It was seen as the natural order, the foundation of a stable society. Then came the Enlightenment, and with it, the slow, sweet poison that began to erode masculine dominance. Philosophers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau started to romanticize the idea of female virtue. They painted women as these delicate, angelic creatures who needed to be protected from the brutish nature of men. Men were no longer the bedrock of civilization. They were a problem to be managed. The seeds of the trap were being sown, disguised as progress and enlightenment. By the 19th century, with the rise of the Victorian era, that trap began to close. Queen Victoria's reign gave birth to the myth of the gentleman. This new ideal man was one who suppressed his natural instincts. He opened doors, he wrote poetry, he worshipped the ground his wife walked on, and he placed female purity on a pedestal. Marriage was no longer about duty, legacy, or power. It was about sentimentality, and you must understand this. Sentimentality, when weaponized, is one of the most powerful forces on earth. It convinces strong men to voluntarily give up their power. Nietzsche saw right through this charade. He famously wrote, "Everything about woman is a riddle, and everything about woman has one solution: pregnancy." He wasn't being crude. He was pointing out a fundamental biological reality that the sentimentalists were trying to erase. But modern society went ahead and erased it anyway. Women were no longer primarily seen as wives and mothers, the essential counterparts to men in building a family. They were reframed as individuals with rights, and it wasn't long before those rights began to eclipse and then trample the rights of men. The 20th century delivered the final, killing blow. It came in the form of two words: no-fault divorce. In 1969, California, always at the forefront of social change, became the first state to allow a person, usually the woman, to divorce her husband without having to prove any fault. No adultery, no abuse, no abandonment. All she had to say were the magic words: irreconcilable differences. Within a single decade, divorce rates across America didn't just rise, they exploded. An entire generation of men who had entered into the sacred contract of marriage in good faith, who had built families and poured their life's work into a shared future, woke up one day to find themselves enemies of the state. They were hit with lawsuits, asset seizures, and restraining orders. They watched as their children were systematically turned against them. The system no longer required a woman to honor her vow, for better or for worse. It only required the man to pay for her decision to leave. And if a man dared to fight back, if he dared to demand fairness in the system, the courts were there to crush him. Consider the case of Thomas, a firefighter from Texas, a man who literally ran into burning buildings for a living. After 12 years of marriage, building a life and raising 2 kids, his wife announced she was leaving him for a younger man she'd met at her gym. In the divorce, she got the house, the kids, and was awarded 30% of his pension for the rest of his life. Think about that. For the rest of his career, for every dangerous shift he worked, a third of his retirement was being funneled to the woman who betrayed him. When Thomas, a man of demonstrable courage and character, begged the judge for equal custody of his children, his passionate plea was labeled as aggressive. He was painted as unstable and a potential threat. He was denied. His ex-wife then moved 3 states away with his children, and there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. This is not justice. This is a system of organized wealth transfer. This is gynocracy, rule by women for the benefit of women. The data doesn't lie. It backs up Thomas's story on a massive scale. A 2020 study published in the American Law and Economics Review found that mothers are awarded sole custody in over 80% of contested divorce cases. 80%. Even when the father is stable, loving, and actively fighting for his children. The message from the system is crystal clear. Your children are not yours. They belong to her. The state merely allows you to pay the bills for them. But perhaps the most sinister part of this entire system is the emotional manipulation that underpins it all. The brainwashing that begins in childhood. Boys are fed a diet of fairy tales about love and sacrifice. We're taught slogans that are repeated so often, they become mistaken for truth. Happy wife, happy life. If you really loved her, you would do anything for her. These are not harmless platitudes. They are social spells. They are incantations designed to make men willingly, even happily, surrender their power, their autonomy, and their judgment. Nietzsche warned us about this very thing. He said, "The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently." Society relentlessly teaches young men that the ultimate prize is female approval. It teaches them to be agreeable, to avoid conflict, to be a nice guy. And then, when they follow that programming, the system punishes them for the very weakness it created. History offers us a grim and chilling parallel: the fall of the Roman Empire. In its final centuries, Roman men became soft. They grew obsessed with pleasure, bread, and circuses, and became submissive to foreign influences and decadent new ideas. Their masculine fire was extinguished. Does that sound at all familiar? Today's Western man is walking the same path, raised on a digital diet of instant gratification, pornography, and the constant lie that marriage is the crowning achievement of a man's life. Meanwhile, women are simultaneously taught to despise traditional masculinity, while still demanding the resources that only strong, ambitious men can provide. The result is a catastrophe. A generation of lost boys, many raised without fathers, who will inevitably repeat the same cycle of defeat. But there is a way out. The men who thrive today, the ones who hold on to their wealth, their freedom, and their self-respect, are the ones who reject this system entirely. They understand that modern marriage, as it currently stands, is a form of legal and financial suicide. They focus on building their own empires, not building a family on a foundation of legal quicksand. They adopt what Nietzsche called the will to power, the unshakable internal drive to dominate their own lives, rather than serving a corrupt and broken system. But even if you see the legal and social traps, the most dangerous lie remains. We still haven't talked about the biological and psychological warfare that's being waged against you. Now we're going to expose why the very emotion of love, the feeling you've been taught to cherish above all else, may have been engineered to be your ultimate downfall. You have been profoundly lied to about love. I don't mean you were just misled or that you bought into a few cheesy movie plots. I mean you have been fundamentally betrayed. The intense emotions you've felt, the noble sacrifices you've made, the sacred vows you believed in. What if all of it was just an illusion? A sophisticated biological and psychological trap, meticulously designed by nature and society to domesticate you and enslave you. I want you to think back to the first time you truly fell in love. That incredible, all-consuming rush. The sleepless nights thinking about her. The irrational, unshakable certainty that this time it was different, that she was different. That wasn't destiny. That wasn't your soul finding its other half. That was your own brain chemistry playing you like a marionette. And if you don't wake up and see the strings, that same chemical reaction will be the cause of your downfall. Let's start with the science, because this isn't just philosophy. In 2013, a neuroscientist named Dr. Helen Fisher decided to map the landscape of love and heartbreak. She took men who had been freshly dumped and put them inside fMRI machines. As these heartbroken men looked at pictures of the women who had left them, she watched their brains light up. The regions that flared up with activity were the exact same areas associated with addiction. The same parts of the brain that fire in a cocaine addict craving their next fix. Her conclusion was groundbreaking and terrifying. Romantic love isn't just an emotion. It is a primal addiction. And just like any powerful addiction, it completely hijacks your rational mind. It clouds your judgment, makes you ignore red flags, erases your personal boundaries, and can turn even the strongest, most logical men into desperate slaves. Now you have to ask yourself the critical question: why? Why would nature wire men to become so hopelessly addicted to women? The answer is as brutal as it is obvious. Because without that powerful chemical leash, free-thinking men would never willingly sign up for the raw deal of modern monogamy and marriage. Nietzsche, with his piercing insight into human nature, saw this clearly. He wrote, "In revenge and in love, woman is more barbaric than man." He wasn't saying women were evil. He was saying that when it comes to the primal drives of love and survival, they operate on a more ruthless, instinctual level. He understood that love is not some gentle, shared bond. It is a biological battlefield, and on that field, women hold a distinct and powerful strategic advantage. Biologically, women are the selectors of the human species. Men compete and women choose. This is the iron law of nature. a law that has been deliberately obscured by centuries of romantic poetry and propaganda. In the animal kingdom, this is obvious. The peacock displays his feathers. The stag locks antlers with his rivals. They fight, they display, they risk death, all for the chance to be chosen by the female. Human males are no different. We just traded in our claws and fangs for paychecks and promises. We compete with our careers, our status, our resources. The result is a system where men labor their entire lives under the beautiful illusion that love is reciprocal, when in reality, it is fundamentally transactional. History proves this beyond any doubt. Consider the ancient and once common practice of the dowry. A woman's family had to pay a man's family to marry her. Why? Because society implicitly understood that taking on a wife and family was a significant burden for a man, a lifelong responsibility that required compensation. Now look at today. The script has been completely flipped. It is now the man who is expected to pay, not just with a ring, but with his money, his freedom, his autonomy, and very often, his entire future. The rise of the romantic marriage in the 18th and 19th centuries wasn't a mark of progress. It was the greatest con job ever pulled on men. By convincing men that love should be the sole foundation of marriage, society tricked them into happily entering a game that was rigged from the start. The data on this is devastating. A 2019 study in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that men consistently fall in love faster and harder than women. It is men who are more likely to report feeling love at first sight. Women, on the other hand, are far more pragmatic and are much more likely to fall out of love first when the circumstances are no longer ideal. This isn't an accident. It is evolutionary strategy. Women are evolutionarily programmed to continuously seek the best possible provider and protector for themselves and their potential offspring. This is often called hypergamy. It means that even if she is with a good man, her biology is always scanning the horizon for a better man. Men, on the other hand, are programmed to bond, to commit, to provide, and to stick around. In our evolutionary past, a male who walked away from a mate risked leaving no legacy at all, but a female who stayed with a weakening mate risked her own survival. Now apply that brutal biological logic to modern dating. A man meets a woman. He falls in love. That chemical addiction kicks in. He commits, he provides, he sacrifices. She enjoys the security and resources he provides until someone better comes along, or until he faces a setback, loses his job, gets sick. Then she leaves. The man is left shattered, not because he is weak, but because his own biology betrayed him. He was designed to bond. She was designed to optimize. This is the dark, unspoken truth behind the myth of the one or soulmates. Love is a chemical weapon, and in the modern world, men are its primary casualties. Even the language we use is a trap. Happy wife, happy life. If you love her, let her go. These are spells meant to ensure male compliance. But the most brutal statistical truth, the one that exposes the myth of unconditional female loyalty, is this. A 2015 study published in the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine found that a woman is 6 times more likely to divorce her male partner if he develops a serious illness like cancer than the reverse. Read that again. A man gets cancer, and his wife is 6 times more likely to abandon him. A woman gets cancer, and her husband almost always stays. So what is the solution? Is it to become bitter? To hate women? Number, that is the weak man's response. The answer is detachment. Not bitterness, not hatred, but a cold, rational clarity. The men who thrive in this environment are the ones who see love for what it is, a powerful and often wonderful chemical reaction, but not a divine, unbreakable bond. They enjoy the company of women, but they do not worship them. They build their own empires instead of placing women on pedestals. They understand Nietzsche's ultimate warning. The man of knowledge must be able not only to love his enemies, but also to hate his friends. He must be willing to detach from even the things he loves, if they threaten his freedom and purpose. This brings us to the final path, the way of the true sovereign man, the man who lives beyond the system's grasp. Consider the story of Eric, a Wall Street banker who did everything right. He married his college sweetheart, bought the big house in the suburbs, and worked 80-hour weeks to give his family the best of everything. Then, at age 42, he came home to an empty house. A note on the counter said she'd taken the kids and left him for her yoga instructor. Most men in that position collapse. They drown themselves in alcohol or antidepressants. But Eric did something radical. He walked away, not from his responsibilities, but from the entire rigged game. He liquidated what was left of his assets, moved to Montenegro, built a remote consulting business, and started living completely on his own terms. No alimony, no court battles, no begging to see his own kids. He is free, and that freedom makes him more powerful and more attractive than any compliant married man could ever hope to be. This is what Nietzsche meant when he wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. The sovereign man doesn't reject women. He simply sees them clearly. He understands that true power lies not in controlling others, but in being utterly uncontrollable himself. The Roman Stoics knew it. The samurai swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, who lived and died undefeated and unmarried, knew it. These men weren't lonely. They were liberated. While other men begged for love, they mastered themselves. And the data today confirms what the ancients understood. Studies from the Journal of Happiness Studies and the National Bureau of Economic Research have found that unmarried, childless men report being the happiest demographic in society. Not married men. The men who said no to the script. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is simple, but it is not easy. 1. Build a body that commands respect for yourself and from others. 2. Accumulate wealth and resources that cannot be easily confiscated. 3. Cultivate a mind so sharp it can cut through every social illusion. And 4. Embrace solitude. Learn to be your own best company until you become the kind of man that others are genuinely drawn to. This is the essence of Nietzsche's Übermensch, the overman, not some cartoon villain, but the man who transcends the petty slave morality of the herd and creates his own values. The system will hate you for this. It will call you selfish, immature, and afraid of commitment. Let it. The same system that glorifies single mothers vilifies sovereign men. Why? Because a man who cannot be controlled through debt, shame, or desire is society's greatest fear. He is a wild card in a world built on predictability. This journey is not about hating women. It is about loving yourself, your freedom, and your purpose more than any illusion. The sovereign man appreciates women, but he never worships them. He refuses to be a character in someone else's story. He writes his own. Nietzsche's final command echoes through the centuries. Become who you are. The cage door has always been open. The question isn't whether you're capable of walking out. It's whether you're brave enough to try.